Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Sunday night, August the 4th. There is breaking news having to do with the Tennessee Titans and this defensive unit. Quandre Diggs reportedly is coming to Tennessee on a one-year deal. We are going to talk about that, the latest on what this means for a Titans secondary that continues to add help throughout the course of the offseason. We will dive into this. We'll talk about just how long the Titans have tried to work this deal out with Quandre Diggs, who now reunites with Jamal Adams, both former Seattle Seahawks safeties going to be playing in Tennessee. Roster depth is something that we will also talk about. Now that we've checked another safety box, how are we feeling about the positional depth of the Titans roster? And wrap things up with a little bit of Sunday Funday, because that's what we do on a Sunday night. Nice to see a lot of you guys in here. More of you will trickle in as we get up and running. I think that there is going to be a lot of this stuff for the Tennessee Titans that makes a ton of sense. So we'll talk about some numbers for Quandre Diggs. We'll talk about the contract numbers as well, and we'll discuss how it fits the best in this Titans defense. Before we get started, need you guys to share this show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch, wherever you are spending your evening with us. Thank you for doing so. We appreciate it. Go ahead and share this show around. If you're hanging out on Twitter, please retweet the show. In fact, I'll do it with you in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you're on Facebook Live, you can share now to public. That's in the bottom left. And if you're on YouTube or on Twitch, I see, Joseph Mitchell, Derek, Amar, David Fletcher. Like the video, subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Text the link to a friend if you're feeling froggy as we talk about this Titans safety edition here on a Sunday night. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time from the Zen Sports Studios. I'm your host, Buck Rising. I'm proud, as always, to be presented to you by the wonderful people at Zen Sports. Download the app, plug in the promo code ATOZTN. Get up to $100 on your no-danger first wager, courtesy of Zen Sports, where betting just got better. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer, where they go above and beyond for you to make sure that you enjoy the car buying process. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com for more information. Of course, you know that the wonderful people at TrueMath Fitness will help you reach your fitness goals, and they are also here to help you with all of your other workout-related needs. Go to TrueMathFitness.com for your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident. All right, so Quandre Diggs, that's the news. Adam Schefter first on the report. We talked about Titans safety help. We talked about when the Titans might be, pushed to pursue Titans safety help. And it turns out after, 12 days of training camp practice, and in the lead up to the first preseason game, it's a game week. Happy game week for all of you who are Titans fans. I assume that's the vast majority of you who are live streaming this show tonight. It is a game week. We will see some of this roster competition that a lot of us have been talking about, a lot of us have been covering. You guys may not necessarily have been able to see yet if you haven't been out to practice. Now we're going to start to see, all right, who's worthy of roster spots, who's falling behind, and how can they differentiate themselves with some live game action. Now, this is a different kind of a signing. This is not a depth piece. This is intended to be a top-of-line starter with Quandre Diggs coming in at 31 years old, and a player who has had a really good background, who fits, I think, alongside Amani Hooker nicely, given that Amani can play a very versatile role here, and the fact that you have some guys who you've looked at throughout the course of training camp, and Elijah Molden and Matt Jackson, who continues to make plays at training camp practice, but they haven't felt very confident in what they have. This additional piece, they think, is going to give them a viable starting unit. Now, the other part of this is that Jamal Adams has not practiced in a couple of days now. He's just been flatly out. The nature of what's keeping him out, the team has not disclosed. So we're in a kind of a wait-and-see mode to find out just, how much time Jamal Adams is going to miss, what is causing him to miss time, if this is a part of the management program for him. Just like it is L'Jarius Sneed, there's a couple of different moving pieces and parts here that I think are fair to question. a little bit. But Quandre Diggs is a starting safety, and you have needed starting safety help. So this is something that is going to only boost the viability of the unit based on what they've been able to have out there to date. The question that we will start with, your Two Rivers Ford take on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. Who does the Quandre Diggs signing benefit the most as we get up and rolling here on this Sunday night? Where do you see the dividends immediately for this additional depth piece that you talk about? You're going to hear from Rand Carthon here in just a second. It's your Two Rivers Ford take. Right after I remind you that the Two Rivers Ford take is presented by the wonderful people at Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer, where you go for quality American-made Ford vehicles and award-winning customer service. Two Rivers Ford is the spot. Everywhere I go, I see Ford Broncos, just like you see on the graphic right there. Ford Broncos all over the road, whether they're soft tops, hard tops, Big Bend, Heritage style with the white tops, Black Diamonds, Raptor, and the smaller Broncos Sports. There are all manner of options for your certified Ford Bronco dealer. Two Rivers Ford is inviting you to get to know the Ford Bronco. It's an open invite. They're going to let you test drive any Bronco model that you so choose. Just go to Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com, the South's most trusted Ford dealer and your Ford Bronco headquarters. Okay, so how do you feel, or who do you feel most benefits from the Quandre Diggs signing on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch? We will discuss at length together. Let me play you a clip from Rand Carthon on with the morning show at my radio station. This was at the very start of training camp practice on safeties and the viability of signing another.
You guys add Jamal Adams. You talked about him a little bit yesterday, the medicals checking out for you guys in that process. Where does he help this defense the most?
I mean, he's a versatile guy, and I know there are some thoughts that he can't do this and he can't do that. But the last time I checked, this guy was a DB that had 9 sacks. That's not easy. And I don't care how many times you blitz him, you still got to get home, and you still got to beat people that are 50 to 60 pounds bigger than you. And he's proven that he's done it and that he can do it. So it gives us versatility. And even in signing Jamal, and I don't think this guy on our team gets enough love, is Amani Hooker.
Yeah.
And his versatility and him being able to move around and move to different spots because, you got to construct it a certain way if you got a guy that's just in one box. You know what I mean? And so, having Hook gives us the freedom to sign a Jamal. And, I was asked a question yesterday if we're going to sign somebody else. And the answer to that question is if we need to, because you can never have enough good football players. And all that is predicated on, Hook's ability to be able to move around and kind of be, as we would term it in football, a rock and roll safety.
A rock and roll safety. So now Quandre Diggs is coming in to help with all of this. And I would probably answer that way, that is who benefits the most from this. Amani Hooker is going to have legitimate safety help. So it's a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million. And again, Adam Schefter is the first on the report. That was Rand Carthon speaking with Ramon, Kayla, and Will. By the way, so speaking of training camp practices and all of this stuff, I will work to see if I can get Quandre Diggs on the radio show. But right now, for our final, at least for 3 of our 4 final training camp broadcasts, we are scheduled to have Tavondre Sweat, J.C. Latham, and Will Levis during Seattle Seahawks joint practice week. So if you haven't been listening to the radio show training camp broadcast, one, you're missing out on a lot of firecrackers or fireworks throughout the course of the training camp practice. It can get a little spicy doing the live radio show out there, as some of you may well know, but it's a great time. And Sweat, Latham, and Levis all scheduled to appear. I'm going to see, since Seattle Seahawks are coming to town for joint training camp practices, if the 4th one of those 4 training camp interviews can't be either Quandre Diggs or Jamal Adams, because I would be interested in talking to both, even though we've already had Amani Hooker on the show to kind of check our annual safety or defensive back box. We've had McCreary and Amani Hooker talking about this secondary, but Sweat, Latham, and Levis on deck right now. We will see how that goes. All right, so who benefits the most? The answer is Amani Hooker. Quandre Diggs, has allowed Jamal Adams, and I know Jamal Adams hasn't gone perfectly to plan in Seattle the past couple of years, but I understand the vision that they were trying to accomplish with the two of them. Now, right now, the safety rotation has included Adams, even though he hasn't been practicing, Elijah Molden, Matt Jackson, who had his third interception of training camp thus far. This was on an overthrow by Malik Willis. He has 2 interceptions off of Will Levis as well. But Diggs is 31. He was a Pro Bowler 3 straight years from 2020 to 2022. He had 18 interceptions with Seattle during his time there. He's significantly less expensive than Justin Simmons, who is apparently closer to double-digit figures or double digits in the millions when it comes to what he's seeking. And this is a 1-year up to $5 million deal for Quandre Diggs. I think that Amani Hooker benefits the most. I think that Jamal Adams, whenever he might return from whatever he's dealing with, because this is now 2 padded practices that he has been unavailable, I am curious to see the deployment of all the defensive backs here, because now all it does is add additional depth, right? You were feeling shaky about the safety depth, which we'll get to, roster depth and positional groups here in just a second. This is just improving the viability of the group from top to bottom, because in reality, you're not just going to need 2 safeties, right? You're probably going to need 4 or 5, depending on how many 3 safety looks you run, how injuries impact you, and this only adds other viable options to what you have at this point in time. Browning Casey says, how much money does Rand have left to cook with at this point? Well, the edge discussion is worth keeping an eye on the available cap space, and I'm sure Over the Cap will have an updated ballpark figure for the Tennessee Titans tomorrow. So that's probably your best resource. I know they were around $20 to $25 million, depending on whether you were looking at Spot Track or Over the Cap prior to this signing, and this does not cut in massively to their available finances. And they can still have some money to be able to make some moves later in the year or after roster cuts, however this ends up working out. So I would say they're probably still in the high teens in available cap space, depending on where you look. All right, so of the position groups now that you have seen them address safety again in the way that we talked about and expected them to do, they've been working on this since the end of July, since closer to the middle of July, as a matter of fact, and it's been just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for both sides contractually. They were able to determine a deal that allows Tennessee to retain some flexibility, that allows Quandre Diggs to cash in again if he has a good season, either with this team or another team. Justin Parr says, man, he was hoping for Justin Simmons. Yeah, a lot of fan bases are hoping for Justin Simmons. And Justin Simmons just, league-wide is, I don't want to say he is asking for too much money, because he's allowed to ask for whatever he thinks he's worth, right? But the biggest sticking point with Justin Simmons has been the dollar amount. He has been unwilling to move off of that. There may well be a team that is willing to pay him, because, of course, injuries are going to happen in training camp, and it will only become more viable of a market the longer that Justin Simmons waits, although less than ideal to wait too long, because then you're kind of putting yourself behind the 8 ball with new team, new teammates, potentially new city, new coaching staff, what have you. There's a lot there, but ultimately the biggest sticking point for not just the Titans, but with every other team that has been interested in Justin Simmons is he costs too much relative to the rest of the market, and he's not so much better than the rest of the market based on what he is seeking at this point. So where do you feel the most confident about the roster depth right now after they have signed Quandre Diggs reportedly? What is the weakest position on the Titans roster after the Quandre Diggs signing? That's the question that we'll ask you on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch in the comment section. We'll talk about it at length together right after I remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by TrueMath Fitness in the Gulch. Go to TrueMathFitness.com. Your first workout is free as a Middle Tennessee resident. No workout ever recycled or repeated. TrueMath always goes above and beyond to help you satisfy your fitness goals. Get the best workout in Middle Tennessee with the best coaching staff and that first workout free, group fitness classes, personal training, or any one of their awesome membership options at TrueMathFitness.com today. All right, so roster depth. Where are you feeling confident right now around what the Titans have on tab and where the weaker parts of the roster are at this point. Section 240 says edge to me is the weakest, linebacker a close second. Outside linebacker says Cody Holzer, so edge generally. MB says defensive line, period, is the weakest as far as the depth goes. Now, that's an interesting discussion because for those of you who caught the 615 Sessions podcast today, it was Ben Arthur and Ben Arthur of Fox Sports and me talking about T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat has continued to be impactful. And in fact, it may be worth, Robert, pulling that Brian Callahan or that J.C. Latham clip that we used earlier at your convenience so we can talk about the defensive line impact, because the defensive line has been hugely impactful with all of this. But there's a couple of different positions that you might look at here. Safety was one, and you felt a little better about it after they signed Jamal Adams. And this was Jamal Adams about a week ago talking about his role and how he plans to be implemented, or kind of the general vibe between his deployment and what Denard Wilson has envisioned.
The main thing, obviously, is my teammates. You know what I mean? Just proving to them that I can, be on the field with them again and, go out there and just compete. That's what it's about.
Coach Callahan said that he kind of envisions, for lack of a better term, a utility role for you, being in a lot of different sub-packages and things like that. How much do you embrace that at this juncture of your career?
I'm going to take it on. Obviously, it's never easy to come in and learn a new system, but I'm willing to. Every day is a grind, and every day I'm in my playbook just learning. Obviously, I'm out there just flying around and just trying to keep up with the guys, and I'm gonna have mistakes. I'm not perfect, and I'm not trying to be. So when I'm out there and I have a mistake or two, obviously I just learn from it and I move on.
That is Jamal Adams speaking. Previously, prior to the Titans signing Quandre Diggs, which is the news of the day, Randy Cherry says definitely right tackle weakest. Well, to NBF's credit, he's come back and gotten in the mix right away. We've had two practices, and obviously the Quandre Diggs news supersedes anything that we've seen at practice, because obviously it's the most recent news. This happened about an hour ago, or this finally was agreed to and finalized about an hour ago. I expect we'll see an official announcement from the team tomorrow or Tuesday. They are not open to media again until Wednesday and Thursday, so that will be the next time that we get out there and get the opportunity to talk with them. And by then, one would assume that Quandre Diggs would be here and be available. But if you felt bad about right tackle prior, you probably feel better about right tackle today, given that Nick Petit-Frere is back, is available, is excited about the idea of practicing. Jonathan says, why are we ignoring the linebacker spot? Well, here's the thing, Jonathan. They had so many needs all over the board, and they haven't ignored the linebacker spot, right? They paid Kenneth Murray a decent contract. They drafted Cedric Gray with a 4th-round pick. They are unproven as a unit. I mean, as a defensive unit, they are unproven, but even more so, they are unproven as an off-ball linebacker group and room. You can't say that they've ignored it when they've poured draft capital and legitimate guaranteed money into it. But I understand your contention if you're dissatisfied with what they have. Now, again, the roster was in such disrepair that they couldn't possibly fix all of this. They weren't going to be able to fix left tackle and also basically left tackle and also the entire right side of the offensive line. They weren't going to be able to get viable, solutions for the next 10 years at both safety spots. They had to go out and pay 2 starting corners in Awuzie and Snead. I mean, just going through the defensive starters that they have added, we're talking about, I think now up to 13 players that have been signed or drafted in the offseason that will ultimately end up playing starting roles for this team on both sides of the ball. That is a ton of new acquisitions. So I understand if you are underwhelmed with your options. But I think that you have to consider, one, they only had so many viable ways to fix a lot of different things. And they're going to have to skimp, for lack of a better term, somewhere. Now, I don't necessarily know that the amount of guaranteed money that they gave Kenneth Murray would be considered skimping. In fact, based on the off-ball linebacker market, it was a pretty solid investment, and they feel confident about the role that Kenneth Murray will play here versus what he was for the Los Angeles Chargers. But just on defense alone, Snead, Awuzie, Diggs. We won't call Jamal Adams a starter yet because he's going to be a situational player, but he will have a role if he's healthy. So we'll leave him out for right now. But that's 3 new starting secondary players. Kenneth Murray, Sebastian Joseph Day, Tavondre Sweat, on top of a defensive coordinator in Denard Wilson. So you're talking about basically half the defense is new, and they've acquired them all in the offseason. So you were going to have this uphill battle anyway. Rebuilding the roster, off-ball linebacker looks like a position group that is worth questioning, right? We'll see how viable it actually becomes once the regular season rolls around, and maybe we'll have a better idea once we see preseason football and some closer to live game reps. Darth Vader says fullback the weakest position. That is accurate because they do not have a fullback on the roster. The Bengals offense or the Brian Callahan offense will not require a fullback, so it will not be how you are accustomed to Titans football looking, because as long as I've been here, there have been fullbacks on the roster in some form or fashion. Ultimately, I think the answer is the edge group. The defensive line stuff, we're seeing guys kind of, compete. Sebastian Joseph Day is a quality player. TK McClendon has had some good snaps. Isaiah Eiton has had some good snaps in training camp practices so far after Tavondre Sweat, who has been a menace, had a safety today. They were doing drills backed up against the end zone. Sweat got Lloyd Cushenberry on skates, backed him up into Will Levis. It would have been a safety. Refs weren't out there today, but it was basically an agreement from a begrudging offensive coaching staff and a very excited defensive coaching staff that Sweat would have been given a safety in that situation. So the depth of the defensive line, I'm not outright down on, because I like their top 3. It is the edge group, right? Without Arden Key, and Arden Key is out there. Arden Key is healthy. Arden Key is practicing. And by the way, Arden Key's 6-game suspension hasn't been announced by the league yet. So we will see how much longer the appeals process kind of pushes that out, if it's an inevitability. With Arden, he chose not to comment when we talked to him. I think that was Saturday. After practice, he was just, until the league makes it official, there's nothing that he has to comment on. I mean, he doesn't have to comment on it anyway if he doesn't want to. But right now, the league hasn't put out that Arden Key suspension. So it is the edge group, because that Arden stuff is looming out there and you don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I expected it on Friday, and that ultimately never came to pass. But in talking to a couple of people today, J.C. Latham in particular, who we spoke to, on working against this defensive line group, this just defensive front unit, and how he's been able to sharpen his tools as a result.
I mean, you don't really want to create bad energy throughout practice. Two alpha dogs, just competing. He's the best, defensive tackle in the game. So every day I'm going to show up and, just try to sharpen my game going against him every single day. And it might get chippy at the end of the day, but that's what it is.
Where do you think you've been able to sharpen your game?
Say again?
Where do you think you've been able to sharpen your game?
Really just paying attention to details. I gave up something down here in the backed up period. He rushed the inside of me, and usually you don't really see something like that. So just being attention to detail with how you're coming off with your feet, your hands, and make sure they're in the right places. Otherwise, you get edge and have a bad play. So
how much are you looking forward?
That was J.C. Latham speaking today about specifically Jeff Simmons, but also the defensive line group. Eric Alonso says, Arden wasn't a good signing in my opinion. Well, they needed edge help. Arden was a kind of opportunity type of player, right? He'd never carved out a full-time starting role for himself. So you looked at Arden Key and said, all right, you think you can do something here. Perhaps a 3-year, $21 million deal is not going to, it's not going to put you out by any stretch of the imagination to bring a guy like that in here. And what you think ultimately is this year he should have been able to establish himself as that full-time starting role. This was a huge year for Arden Key. They don't have to keep him beyond this season if they are also dissatisfied with it. And I can understand the organization being disappointed in Arden being one of these guys or a guy that is going to miss a period of time like this, because I don't want to say that they were counting on him. They are counting on Arden Key to be a starting caliber player, and to have a starting caliber player miss the first 6 games of the season, according to reports. We're still waiting on the suspension itself, but expected to miss the first 6 games of the season. Yeah, that's pretty disenchanting. That's a huge missed opportunity for Arden Key, who could have done something, I think, meaningful here and established himself for the first time in his career. Justin says Arden came out firing last year against the Saints. Yeah, that's week 1 though. I mean, week 1 is an entire lifetime ago. So what he did against the Saints does not matter to me anymore, especially considering that it was not consistent enough to matter down the stretch. And listen, Arden is, I think, I don't want to say Arden is confident, of course, in his abilities every time you talk to him. Now, he exudes nothing but confidence and willingness to work and all those things. I think he's got the right attitude, and I don't question his effort at any point, of course. But I do think that the whole situation leaves a lot to be desired, and now the Titans are going to have to continue to address the edge position. They were probably going to have to do that anyway prior to Arden's suspension. Derek Wright says, Buck, is there any way the league can overturn the suspension? I mean, yeah, but I guess, and that's what they're pursuing, but that almost never happens. So there is an appeals process. It's not clear, though, whether Arden is appealing. It's just that the league has not announced a suspension yet. So whether he would even have a plan to appeal remains to be seen, because until the league officially levies the suspension, there is nothing to appeal on official record yet. So right now, everybody's just kind of in a holding pattern with that process. Okay, Sunday Funday is what we are going to wrap things up with next. We'll have a lot more discussion about this tomorrow on the radio show from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. Like I said, we're expecting J.C. Latham and Tavondre Sweat on the radio show this week. Taylor Lewan is also going to stop by because apparently I'm a Taylor Lewan guy. So I told Lewan, all right, if I'm going to be a Taylor Lewan guy, you've got to come in here and at least let me get something out of it. And we'll talk some left tackle play with Lewan, because the Latham thing is interesting. And I don't think it's going to be seamless, and it's worth talking to Taylor about, from a football side of things, how you kind of work through that process, and especially with established guys on the roster, because if you remember, Lewan came in when Michael Ruse was still here. Hell, I even think they had Lewan play right tackle for a game. So it's an interesting kind of, given that he's the last competent Titans left tackle that we've seen play football here, I think it's worth getting his feedback on where J.C. Latham is going to have to work through the kind of struggles that he's going to see and the competition that he's going to be up against as it starts to get more real this week with preseason football. So, it's going to be a great week. Lewan, Sweat, Latham, Will Levis next week on the radio show when the Seattle Seahawks come to town for joint training camp practices. We're going to have a lot of great guests for you this season. Training camp is only the start. Okay, so Sunday Funday. What is the best thing that you saw in sports this weekend? Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. The best thing that I've seen this weekend is Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll participating in WWE events up in Cleveland. He was a part of the matches. This is him with Triple H, I think prior to the match beginning the other night.
Best, man. It is the best. This is, when you see somebody succeed at the level that they have, that he has, and is yet a massive fan of what we do, that's the best for us. So when we can all get together and we love his music and he loves our product, and we share that passion together, man, this is when it's the absolute best.
Perfect, because we're watching every week, baby. We're watching every week. Crazy. Awesome, dog. Thank you.
I'm very happy for Jelly Roll. He's doing great things. It's been an awesome 2 years for him, and I know that he has really enjoyed the WWE opportunities that he's gotten. I know he seemed to kill it. I'm not a wrestling person myself, so I don't want to speak at a turn here. I know Bert is far more educated on the subject matter than I, but it seems to be and Bert gave him a thumbs up, so apparently the whole thing went well. I know that's a lot of people's childhood dreams to get in the ring that way, and Jelly just continues to live the dream after really, a lot of years of trying to earn those opportunities. And you always like to see local people succeed the way that Jelly has been able to. So really, really cool. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight. Like I said, radio show, 3 hours. We'll be talking about Quandre Diggs. We'll be talking about a lot of stuff that happened in practice. What did NPF? I I had a whole show planned today. Bert and I had a whole show planned today just specifically about T'Vondre Sweat because he's been out there kicking everybody's ass. So NPF, T'Vondre Sweat, Quandre Diggs, all kinds of other Titans practice observations. You're going to hear from Mason Rudolph as well on the backup quarterback competition because that's not irrelevant as we move towards the first preseason game. It's a game week. Happy game week to all of you involved. I will be covering a game at Nissan Stadium on Saturday. I assume a good many of you will be there and participating. Let's have a great week. Looking forward to getting after it with you this week on the radio show as well, 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. And, of course, we'll be back here with you tomorrow night on A to Z Sports Prime Time. See you guys.
Go home! Go home! Go home! You're embarrassing Nashville. Go home!